The silver teacup struck the marble hard enough to silence 9 armed men. A second earlier, Vittoria Sable had mocked the new maid's broad hands, asking whether Bellasco House had lowered its standards or merely widened its uniforms. No one laughed. No one defended Leona Briggs. Raffaele Bellasco watched from his wheelchair while Vittoria ordered her to hold the heavy silver service beside his right leg, the leg that had felt nothing for 9 years. Then Vittoria drove her fingers into Leona's elbow. The cup tipped. Scalding tea soaked through Rafe's trousers. His foot tore backward from the metal rest before the porcelain hit the floor. Rafe's face changed. Hot. Vittoria went pale, then recovered too quickly. He cannot feel that leg. Leona did not beg for her job. She dropped the tray, pulled the burning fabric from his skin, and pressed a cool cloth over the reddening mark. When a servant reached for the stained towel, Leona caught her wrist. "Do not wash this," Vittoria's voice sharpened. "You have already done enough." Leona looked at Rafe. "Your leg moved before you saw the tea. You spoke before the cup struck the floor." Around them, Bellasco captains stared at the man they had called Numb for nearly a decade. Then the private neurologist entered carrying a prepared syringe. Rafe looked from the needle to Vittoria. For the first time in 9 years, pain was not the most terrifying thing he felt. It was doubt. Rafe did not look at the broken cup. He stared at the right foot that had shifted from its metal support. The movement had been weak, but heat still burned in a narrow line beneath his knee. Leona placed the tray beyond reach, pulled the wet fabric from his skin, and called for cool water before Vittoria could control the room. "Take the towel to laundry," Vittoria ordered. A servant stepped forward. Leona caught the white cloth first. "No. It belongs with the incident record." Vittoria's expression hardened. "You are the incident." Leona ignored her. She cooled the reddening skin, asked Celeste to photograph it with the medical tablet, then read the time aloud. 9:18. Celeste hesitated until Rafe said, "Do it." The camera flashed. Around them, the Bellasco captains avoided his eyes. They had seen him command men without raising his voice. None knew where to look while he studied a pain they had been told could not exist. "I felt it before the cup broke," he said. Vittoria moved beside his chair. "You heard the porcelain and your body reacted." "No. Heat first, sound after." Leona glanced at the silver pot on the carpet. Beneath its handle, a stamp read S4. She repeated the code under her breath. Vittoria noticed. Miss Briggs hand over the towel and wait for dismissal. Leona folded the stained side inward, placed the cloth in an incident sleeve, and wrote the time across the seal. "Celeste, initial this." The house manager stiffened. "I was not instructed to preserve it." "You were instructed to record an injury." Celeste looked at Vittoria, then at the red mark on Rafe's leg. Her pen touched the label. Heavy footsteps crossed the corridor. Dr. Silas Arden entered carrying a tablet and a prepared syringe. He barely examined the burn. "A familiar spasm," he said. "I will administer the supplemental dose before testing him." Leona looked at the needle, then at Rafe. "Has anyone explained what that dose will do before he approves it?" Arden paused with the syringe between 2 fingers. "It reduces spasticity so I can separate a reflex from meaningful sensation." "And what else?" Leona asked. Vittoria turned on her. "You are not part of this consultation. Neither is anyone who has not asked him." Arden's mouth thinned. "The dose may cause weakness and drowsiness. It is routine." Vittoria placed a hand on Rafe's shoulder. "You have taken it before every examination." Rafe looked up at her. "Before every examination, when necessary." He held out his hand. "Show me the medication schedule." Arden lowered the tablet but kept it. Technical settings are maintained by your medical representative. I asked for my schedule. Rafe Vittoria said softly, "You're upset." He turned his chair, removing her hand. That was not an answer. Arden said movement without the dose could be dismissed as uncontrolled spasm. Then record the conditions, honestly, Leona said. Test him before it. Explain it. Give it only if he agrees. Rafe studied her. You speak as though you have authority here. No, I speak as though consent has to belong to someone. Anger rose because she had named something he had stopped noticing. He looked back at Arden. No supplemental dose until I see the complete schedule. Vittoria's fingers tightened around his chair. Arden capped the syringe, examined the reddened skin, and called the movement a familiar withdrawal reflex. Panic can create sequence errors, he said. Rafe extended his hand toward Leona. The towel. She did not move. I will give you a copy of the seal record. The sample stays outside any system controlled by one person. His eyes hardened. You are refusing me. I am refusing to make this evidence depend on anyone's permission, including yours. Before Rafe could answer, Celeste entered with the incident report. Vittoria took it first. The page described a spill, a startled spasm, and no confirmed sensation. The word hot appeared nowhere. Leona read the report twice. First, she searched for the word she had heard. Then she counted what had been removed. It said she lost her balance without outside contact. It called the T-standard serving temperature. It placed Rafe's movement after the cup shattered and described his voice as indistinct. I will not sign this. Vittoria folded her hands. You were dismissed from your last position for refusing a supervisor's correction. I hoped you learned something. Rafe looked up. Leona had worked in Bellasco House for 9 days. Vittoria had researched the one detail most useful for discrediting her. Celeste stood beside the desk with her pen uncapped. Sign as witness, Vittoria ordered. Celeste looked at the sealed towel, then the report. She did not write. Vittoria placed a second document before Leona. It offered 6 months' pay if she accepted sole responsibility, surrendered every item from the room, and left before evening. This is more kindness than your record deserves. Leona wrote 10:06 beside the receipt line and returned the pen. I acknowledge receiving it. I do not accept it. Rafe studied the timestamp. Why mark the hour? Because papers change after people stop remembering when they arrived. Celeste's breath caught. Leona turned to her. Was S4 the pot prepared for this room? The service was changed, Celeste whispered. Vittoria's stare cut across the desk. Celeste straightened. I should not have said that. Where is the temperature ledger? Leona asked. There is no reason for you to see it. Rafe rolled toward the wall panel. Then show me the recording. Adrian Voss arrived minutes later with a security tablet. The camera did not fail, he said. 11 seconds were transferred into restricted legal storage. Rafe's voice lowered. By whom? Adrian turned the screen so only he could see the access line. The authorization code belongs to Miss Sable. Vittoria did not look at Adrian's screen. I transferred the segment because it contains private medical information. It contains my body, Rafe said. Why can't I see it? Adrian shifted the tablet against his palm. Restricted legal storage requires confirmation from the medical representative. The room went still. Rafe turned toward the wall panel beside his desk and entered his own security code. The system rejected him. A second line appeared. Representative authorization required. Leona watched his face harden. Bellasco House had doors that opened at his voice elevators built for his chair and armed men who moved when he lifted one finger. Yet a record of his own leg had been locked behind Vittoria's permission. "Restore my access," he ordered. "I can preserve the footage," Adrian said, "but changing the authority chain requires a valid directive. You are hearing one." Vittoria stepped between them. "This is exactly why the continuity review exists. You are reacting to one frightened employee and an involuntary spasm." "I felt heat," Rafe said, before the sound. The doors opened behind them. Thomas Bellasco entered carrying a dark folder, his silver watch chain visible against his vest. He listened without greeting, then asked Rafe to describe the sensation, the sequence, and what decision he wanted made. Rafe answered each question without hesitation. Tomas looked at Vittoria. "Freeze deletion. No one alters the recording." Then he faced Rafe. "That does not prove conspiracy. It proves there is something to examine." Vittoria exhaled as if reason had returned to the room. The continuity vote remains scheduled for 6 days from now. Thomas opened the folder she had prepared for him. A numbered capacity form sat on top. He studied the filing code, then the date beneath it. "Why," he asked slowly, "does this evaluation already have a case number from 2 days before the tea was spilled?" Vittoria answered before Arden could. "The number reserves a file for the continuity vote. It is administrative." Thomas turned the form toward the light. The medical conclusion was blank, but Arden's signature line had already been prepared. Leona noticed the version code below it. That draft was created 48 hours before the spill. Vittoria looked at her as though the uniform had spoken. "You are not qualified to interpret legal metadata. I can read a date." Thomas closed the folder. "No one alters this document." Vittoria shifted her attention to the sealed towel. "Then deal with the employee withholding Bellasco property." Rafe extended his hand again. "Give it to me." Leona held the evidence sleeve against her apron, not as the only copy. His voice cooled. "You are standing in my house. That is exactly the problem. The report changed here. The video was sealed here. If I hand the only sample into the same system, it can disappear here." Every guard watched her. Rafe's jaw tightened. Refusal inside Bellasco House had always been treated as a challenge. He nearly answered by habit. Then he looked at the form Thomas held and the locked panel beside his chair. "What would make you release it?" Leona had not expected the question. "An independent witness signs the transfer. I keep a copy of every page bearing my name, and no one answers medical questions for you." Vittoria gave a short laugh. "A maid is setting clinical conditions. A witness is setting evidence conditions." Rafe studied Leona until the room became uncomfortable. "Agreed." Vittoria stepped toward him. "Outside, physicians create security exposure. So does a capacity file opened before the event meant to justify it." Rafe turned to Adrian. "Find a neurologist with no contract debt or loyalty tied to this house." Then he called Dr. Naomi Surratt himself. When she answered, he said, "I need an examination. No one in this house is allowed to explain for me." Naomi Surratt arrived alone and refused the confidentiality packet Vittoria placed before her. "This authorizes you to receive my findings before the patient does," she said. "I will not sign it." Vittoria's smile held. Bellasco House has security requirements. So does informed consent. Naomi turned to Rafe. "Do you understand why I am here to determine whether what I felt can be repeated? And that one reaction does not mean you will walk." His jaw tightened. "Yes." Only then did she begin. Vittoria tried to summarize 9 years of treatment. Naomi raised one hand. "I asked him. The first tests produced almost nothing. Rafe could not reliably identify light touch below the right knee. Then along a narrow strip of his inner shin, he answered correctly, twice. On the third trial, he missed. Naomi recorded every result without praise or disappointment. When she asked him to draw his right knee upward, the muscle beneath his trousers tightened. His heel shifted less than an inch. Again, he said, "Not yet." Naomi checked his left leg and the fatigue crossing his face. "This is not a recovery demonstration. It is a baseline." Arden watched from the doorway. Without the supplemental antispastic dose, the result is contaminated by uncontrolled tone. Naomi faced him. "Was that dose given before the examinations summarized in your reports when clinically indicated? Then why is the timing absent?" Vittoria stepped forward. "You were invited to examine him, not accuse his physician. I am identifying the conditions under which his data were collected." Leona compared the medication sheet Rafe had received with Arden's answer. No supplemental doses appeared. Rafe saw her expression. "What your schedule lists only the baseline program." His attention returned to Arden. "Give me the complete pump log." Arden closed his tablet. "That is technical medical data. You do not have direct access without going through your authorized representative." Rafe had signed the original medical authorization 3 years earlier during a winter when pain kept him awake for days. The document on Arden's tablet looked familiar. The additions beneath it did not. Each amendment expanded Vittoria's authority from receiving reports to approving access to controlling data produced by his pump. "I never gave you ownership of my records," he said. Vittoria remained calm. "You gave me the power to protect them." "From whom?" "From anyone who could use your condition against you." Leona looked at the locked screen. Including him, Vittoria ignored her. Rafe ordered Thomas and Naomi to witness a direct revocation of every information privilege not required for safety. Arden warned that sudden medication changes could trigger dangerous spasticity. "No one is stopping the baseline treatment," Naomi said. "We are stopping unapproved supplemental dosing while the program is reviewed." For the first time, the distinction belonged to Rafe. Adrian requested permission to examine the house network. Medical devices connected through Bellasco security for remote maintenance, which meant access records might exist outside Arden's files. Vittoria called the search a breach of privacy. Rafe answered, "My privacy cannot be used to hide information from me." Hours later, Adrian returned with device backups. He would not open them until he preserved their origin, but the dates matched moments Rafe remembered. A reflex examination, 2 council meetings, and an interview, after which Vittoria had said he seemed confused. Leona placed those dates beside the medication sheet. Everyone followed unusual exhaustion. "That is not a diagnosis," she said. "It is a pattern worth checking." Tomas arrived before sunset with a formal notice. The continuity vote would proceed on the 6th day. No postponement. Adrian then opened a separate consent file. It carried Rafe's electronic signature at 11:26 p.m. Rafe stared at the time. "I was asleep before 11. The night care log placed Rafe in bed at 10:41. His evening medication was recorded at 10:47. At 10:58, a nurse noted that he was asleep. Yet the treatment amendment carried his signature 28 minutes later. Adrian checked the corridor cameras. No one entered to wake him. The signing device had connected from Vittoria's study. "You gave me emergency authority," Vittoria said. "I used it to prevent an interruption in treatment." Thomas read the document. The emergency proxy was never activated. Silas judged the adjustment necessary. Naomi turned to Arden. "What emergency occurred?" Arden glanced at the tablet. "Escalating spasticity. There is no event note, no examination, and no complaint from the patient. Rafe stared at his name on the screen. For years, Vittoria had said medication blurred his memory. Now the missing memory had become permission. Leona placed the resignation statement beside the treatment amendment. The pages came from different offices, but their structure was the same: a conclusion written first, a signature requested later, and silence treated as agreement. Rafe looked at her. I demanded the towel because I thought control was protection. You demanded the only copy. I was wrong. The apology did not erase her caution, but it changed the room. He did not order her reinstated when Vittoria announced her suspension for withholding Bellasco property and interfering with treatment. Instead, Rafe asked, "Do you want to leave or remain as a witness?" Leona folded the unsigned resignation paper. I want every document with my name preserved. Then I will testify. Vittoria ordered Adrian to remove her access to the main wing. As Leona collected her things from the service office, she saw an old reimbursement code in a storage index. It listed a neurological rehabilitation assessment from Rafe's first year after the shooting. The physician's name had been removed. The report itself was missing. Leona copied the reimbursement code onto her suspension notice and carried it to Thomas. This payment exists, but the assessment it purchased does not. Thomas checked the index. The code belonged to Bellasco Medical Trust's rehabilitation coverage. Because the original had been used for insurance, he could order it from the external vault without Vittoria's approval. She arrived before the file was opened. A 9-year-old opinion has no relevance to his present condition. Then it should not frighten you, Rafe said. The sealed report named a specialist. He vaguely remembered a man Vittoria had dismissed as selling impossible hope. Naomi read the findings aloud. The injury was incomplete. Pinprick sensation had appeared intermittently along the right shin. A faint, voluntary contraction had been recorded at the hip. The conclusion promised no cure and no independent walking. It recommended continued neurological review and rehabilitation. Rafe looked at Arden. You saw this. Arden's signature appeared beneath a later note marking the results inconclusive. The responses were inconsistent, he said. And therefore erased, Naomi asked. Reclassified, from incomplete injury to no meaningful function. Arden said he had protected Rafe from exhausting treatment, with little chance of success. Vittoria moved closer. We spared you years of false hope. Rafe's voice remained quiet. You did not spare me hope. You removed my right to decide what it was worth. Leona watched the anger settle into something colder. The injury and weakness were real. What had been taken was not a hidden ability to walk, but the knowledge that part of the pathway remained. Thomas closed the report and opened the continuity agenda. The medical capacity resolution appeared first. Beneath it sat a proposal to transfer 3 northern pharmaceutical routes to Meridian Care Consortium. Why, Thomas asked, is a transport contract scheduled immediately after a vote on who may speak for Rafe. Thomas spread the voting confirmations across the table. 9 seats, 5 required. 4 members have already indicated support for Meridian. Rafe examined the names. 2 feared instability. 1 had been promised investment through an affiliated company. The 4th wanted the matter finished before the northern routes lost value. And the 5th, Thomas placed the capacity resolution beside the transport proposal. If Vittoria becomes your medical proxy, she casts your vote on trust matters. Silence settled harder than anger. Vittoria remained composed. The proxy exists to preserve continuity. For 18 months, Leona said from the doorway. Thomas had authorized her presence as a document witness despite her suspension. She placed 2 pages side by side. The proxy lasts 18 months. Meridian's management fee lasts 18 months. Matching terms prove nothing. Vittoria replied. No, Leona said. They tell us where to look. Rafe recognized Meridian's name from a research summary Arden had praised. Adrian retrieved the foundation records. Arden's clinic had received funding through a medical grant linked to Meridian. Tomas opened another filing. A consulting trust created by Vittoria's former law office received fees from the same network. The ownership was indirect, but the conflict was real. You are letting a suspended maid interpret corporate structure, Vittoria said. Leona did not flinch. I am reading 2 dates and the same duration. Mr. Bellasco knows what the companies mean. Rafe followed the entities through shipping licenses and cold storage contracts. The medical vote was not beside the transport vote for convenience. It supplied the missing ballot. Vittoria ordered Celeste to remove Leona from the property before sunset. Rafe turned his chair. I can cancel that order. Leona shook her head. I do not need you to keep me here. I need you to guarantee I can enter the council room on the 6th day. Leona left the main wing without resisting the suspension order. By noon, Vittoria had circulated a notice describing her as careless, unstable, and obsessed with proving a medical miracle. Celeste found her own name beneath a statement she had never made, that Leona ignored service rules and invented the contact at her elbow. Vittoria placed the temperature ledger on the desk. The electronic record is sufficient. Destroy the old book. Celeste remembered the report rewritten under her signature and closed both hands around the black cover. No. It was her first refusal in 17 years. She sealed the ledger in the operations safe with the original incident draft. In the security room, Adrian created a read-only copy of the missing 11 seconds and preserved the transfer metadata. Leona had already sent the sealed cloth sample to Naomi's office by tracked courier. Copies of Vittoria's resignation offer and the 48-hour capacity file were with Thomas. No single person held everything. When Rafe learned this anger came first. He had survived by gathering every weapon into his own hand. You distributed evidence about me without permission. Leona stood beside the guest wing door, her badge already disabled. I distributed copies. The originals remain with their lawful custodians. He looked toward the locked medical corridor. For 9 years, one system had held every original. And if I order them returned, then you repeat the structure we are trying to expose. Rafe did not cancel her departure or command her to remain. Will you continue as a witness until the records are opened before the council? She moved into an independent guest suite beyond Vittoria's authority. That evening, Naomi repeated the motor examination. At her command, the muscle above Rafe's right knee tightened. His heel lifted a few centimeters, held for 2 seconds, then dropped as exhaustion crossed his face. Naomi waited until Rafe's breathing steadied before testing the movement again. She changed the order of every command and recorded each failure beside the successful responses. Rafe identified pressure along the same narrow strip of his right shin. When she asked for movement, the muscle above his knee tightened after a delay. His heel rose a few centimeters, trembled, and fell. That is voluntary, Naomi said. It is also weak and easily fatigued. Arden folded his arms. Expectation can trigger patterned spasticity. Then the council test will use an unannounced command, Naomi replied. He will not know when I intend to ask. Rafe tried to lift the leg again. Stop, she said. I need to know I can repeat it. You need the muscle to recover before you ruin the next result. Frustration sharpened his face. Leona remained beyond the treatment line, holding no equipment and offering no hand. He looked at her. If I cannot do it in that room, Vittoria wins. No. If you cannot lift your leg, the records are still altered. Your answers are still yours. Your vote is still yours. For 9 years, Rafe had treated standing as the border between power and dependence. Now he heard the same assumption in his own voice that Vittoria had used against him. Adrian entered with the authenticated security copy. The 11 seconds had not been deleted. They had been moved under Vittoria's legal access code. Frame by frame, the recording showed her strike Leona's elbow, the cup tilt, and Rafe's foot pull away before his eyes dropped. His mouth formed the word hot before the porcelain struck marble. Then Vittoria spoke. He cannot feel anything in that leg. Rafe watched twice. She said it before Arden examined me. Leona studied the frozen image. Then the question is not why she doubted what happened. It is why she trusted the old record more than your body. Rafe kept his gaze on the screen. What did she know? He asked. That I was never allowed to know. Adrian traced Meridian through 4 holding companies before the pattern became visible. The consortium did not own Arden's clinic. It paid a research foundation, which paid a laboratory, which covered the clinic's equipment leases. Vittoria's former law office administered the foundation and received a percentage from every contract it placed. Tomas laid the payments beside the continuity agenda. The money does not prove they falsified a diagnosis. No, Rafe said. The records do. Naomi separated the medical evidence from the financial trail. The first-year report documented incomplete injury. Later files removed its positive findings. Supplemental medication appeared before examinations, but not in summaries. The 1126 Amendment expanded access without Rafe's consent. None of those acts created his paralysis. Together, they made dependence easier to describe as permanent incapacity. Leona opened the service ledger. Pot S4 had been requested by Vittoria's office 30 minutes before the meeting. Its temperature was 82 degrees. A handwritten change moved it from the side table to the tray Leona was ordered to hold beside Rafe's numb leg. Vittoria read the entry without blinking. A serving instruction is not an assault. Adrian played the 11 seconds. Her fingers struck Leona's elbow. You intended the spill, Thomas said. I intended to expose an incompetent employee, and you believed the tea could not hurt me, Rafe said. For the first time, Vittoria's composure fractured, because every report for 9 years said you could not feel it. The admission settled across the room. She had trusted the record because she had helped build it. Adrian opened Meridian's final term sheet. The transfer granted control of 3 pharmaceutical routes, including medical cargo exempt from ordinary inspection. Beneath the 18-month fee appeared one final condition. Activation required a valid proxy vote cast on Raffaele Bellasco's behalf. The council chamber opened with 9 chairs, 5 sealed evidence packets, and 1 empty place reserved for Vittoria's proxy vote. Rafe entered in his wheelchair beside Thomas. Leona followed as a witness, not an employee. Vittoria objected. Her misconduct is part of the incapacity event. Then question her under the same record as everyone else, Thomas said. Naomi testified first. She described an incomplete spinal injury, repeatable sensation, and weak voluntary movement. She promised no cure and offered no opinion on business authority. Arden called the results medically insignificant. Insignificant to walking is not insignificant to truth, Naomi replied. Vittoria presented 9 years of fatigue, missed meetings, and delegated decisions. Each example sounded reasonable until Rafe asked who had chosen the supplemental doses before those events. Arden refused to answer without legal review. Thomas marked the refusal. Vittoria turned to Rafe. You are overwhelmed. Let me explain what you intend. His hand closed around the wheel rim. "No one answers for me," she continued as if protecting him. Rafe interrupted with the root values and every term in Meridian's proposal. He identified the 4 pledged votes and the proxy clause supplying the 5th. Then he revoked Victoria's medical authority aloud and submitted the signed revocation witnessed by Naomi and Thomas. One councilman leaned forward. "This still does not resolve whether your decisions are influenced by the possibility of recovery." Rafe looked at his motionless right foot. "I may never walk independently. That does not make my judgment borrowed." Thomas asked the final procedural question: would Rafe submit to an unannounced motor command before the vote without medication changes or advanced timing? Victoria smiled for the first time that morning. Rafe knew one failed movement could become the image she needed. "Yes," he said. "But my authority will not depend on whether my leg obeys." Naomi did not announce the test. She continued questioning Arden about missing medication entries, while Rafe sat beneath the council lights, his right foot on the metal plate. Victoria watched his leg instead of his face. "Describe the first-year finding," Naomi said. Rafe answered without looking down. "Intermittent sensation along the inner shin. Weak voluntary contraction at the hip. No promise of independent walking." Naomi closed the report. "Lift your right knee." For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the fabric above his knee tightened. His heel dragged against the plate and rose barely 2 centimeters. It held through one breath, trembled, and fell. No one applauded. Naomi recorded the movement delay and fatigue. Voluntary response observed. Limited strength. Result does not establish functional walking. Victoria stood. 2 centimeters cannot erase 9 years of medical fact. "It does not," Rafe said. "It proves the record was never complete." Arden argued that expectation could still influence the result. Naomi reminded him that the timing had been concealed and no supplemental dose had been given. Thomas entered both facts into the council record. One of Meridian's 4 supporters withdrew his confirmation. "I voted for continuity, not for a proxy created through concealed treatment." Victoria turned to the remaining members. His judgment is now tied to a fantasy of recovery. Rafe placed both hands on his wheels. "Then judge the decisions I made before this leg moved. I identified the contract, the conflict, the false signature, and the missing vote. None required me to stand." Tomas called for the capacity resolution. 4 hands rose in support of Victoria's proxy. The 5th chair remained still. Victoria looked toward Rafe's place at the table where the proxy ballot had already been printed with his name. Rafe reached for it, tore it across the signature line, and said, "You do not get my vote because my body failed to obey you." The torn proxy ballot lay across the council table. Thomas counted again. 4 votes supported Victoria. 4 opposed her. Rafe's ballot, the one she had prepared to cast, no longer existed. "The motion fails," Thomas said. Victoria remained standing. "You cannot let one gesture overturn 9 years of care." "It did not," Rafe replied. The false signature, concealed dosing, altered reports, restricted video, and Meridian contract did. He did not order her arrested. Instead, Adrian preserved all Bellasco Medical Trust records. Tomas suspended the transport proposal pending an independent financial inquiry. Arden's access to Rafe's pump was revoked under Naomi's supervision, and the forged amendment and hidden payments were referred for investigation. Victoria looked at Rafe as if betrayal belonged to him. "Everything I did kept you alive." "You needed me alive," he said. Dependent was the part that paid. Celeste placed the original temperature ledger and incident draft before the council. Adrian authenticated the 11-second recording. Leona opened the final evidence packet and stated what she witnessed: the strike to her elbow, the word hot, the demand for the towel, and the report that removed all three. When the hearing ended, the council restored Rafe's direct access to his medical and security records. Every future proxy required 2 independent witnesses, an expiration date, and confirmation from him while fully alert. No single office would hold the only copy of any capacity document. Outside the chamber, Rafe stopped beside Leona. His right leg rested motionless on the metal plate. "I cannot offer you your old position," he said. "Because I disobeyed you, because the house needs someone who is allowed to." He offered her authority to build an independent incident and evidence office answerable to the full council, not to him alone. Leona read every line before signing. Behind them, the empty 5th chair was removed from the table. Vittoria believed care became authority when the person receiving it was too exhausted to question who controlled the records, medicine, and vote. Arden believed uncertainty could be edited until dependence looked permanent. Rafe's injury had always been real. The lie was that it gave others ownership of his choices. 8 months later, he used his wheelchair through Bellasco House. In therapy with braces and support, he could stand and take several careful steps. No one called it a miracle. Leona's independent evidence office kept duplicate records beyond any single person's control, and every report preserved the words, "Powerful people once tried to remove." Rafe never asked her to become obedient. She never mistook his apology for permission to stop watching him. The first pain in 9 years did not restore his body. It restored the question everyone had stopped asking: who decides for a man still capable of deciding for himself?